Welcome to Hollywood and Sip. I'm your host, Kat Smith, and with me today I have Stacey Steinberg, the author of Growing Up Shared: How Parents Can Share Smarter on Social Media and what you can do to keep your family safe in a no privacy world. And it releases August 4th, is that right?
It is. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, yeah. And I already see a question that I didn't even write down. What do you mean by a no privacy world?
So I think we're living at a time where information that we put out on the internet really can end up in so many different places, even when we never expect it to. And so for ourselves and for our kids, I think it's really important that we consider what could happen with information that we share and where it might end up. And so parents need to be more well informed so that they can make good decisions when they do share.
And what prompted you to write this book?
So I'm a mom who is also a photographer, and I've seen firsthand how much I enjoyed making connections online, keeping in touch with family and friends. I also took a lot of pictures of other people's kids, and I watched them really enjoy sharing the holiday cards online and other information. But I'm also a former child abuse prosecutor and somebody who has seen firsthand how images can end up in the wrong hands. And so this issue really found its genesis in self-reflection. I'm raising kids as kind of in that first generation of parents to raise kids alongside social media. And I started to really wonder how it was that I could both protect my children's privacy and honor their wishes for privacy if they came to have them when they got older. And also if there was a way to do that while still safely sharing my story as, a mom, because that's part of who I am.
It's such a weird world now. I mean, the memes go around and we laugh and joke about them, but really when we were growing up, we didn't have any of this. And the memes are things like, can you imagine if there had been camera phones when we were growing up? And can you imagine if everybody could share when we were teenagers, how different our lives would be now? But now we are in that age where all of the children are legitimately growing up from birth with cameras around them all the time.
Yeah, the pictures that we used to pull out for at Thanksgiving as like the family slideshow are now being shared in real time on so many parents' news feeds. In fact, Pew Research just had a study that came out yesterday that said almost 4 out of 5 parents, almost 80% of parents share about their family on social media. And I found that there were a lot of folks who argued that parents should never share online. And I think that's a really valid position. And I really respect parents who make that decision for their families. But I also thought that as a mom and a researcher and someone who does believe that parents should have the autonomy to make decisions for themselves and for their families, that what I might be able to be more effective than saying don't share at all, instead to help parents understand what the potential risks are so that they could make the most well-informed decisions for their families.
And something in there struck me. Oh, I hear a weird echo. Sorry. The Thanksgiving story when
Yeah.
you it wasn't just that you only brought them out at special events. It was that you took time thinking about which images you were going to share because you only have so much time. You don't want to bore somebody. So you really thought about which pictures were the best and which ones you wanted to show. And also thinking, because I'm also a photographer, going back to film days, when you were taking pictures, you didn't just take all the pictures and then share the best. You took the time to think about that as you were doing it. And then in printing them, you would then look at the negatives and you would pick the best from that. You wouldn't print all of them. So I think we are in a strange time where it's just really too easy just to share everything.
It is. It's so easy to share everything. And it's also so easy to mom shame. I find that in my work a lot, that parents are either on one side or the other with whether parents should share or not share. And, I've seen firsthand how families have benefited. It's cool that you're a photographer too. One of the things that I had done for many years is I offered free photography sessions to families battling chronic illnesses. We have a really large children's hospital here. And those pictures told such a powerful story, and a lot of the families chose to use those pictures to help to raise money for like childhood cancer awareness, or to keep distant friends and family connected, or to help their kids feel like they had a community of support behind them, because for many of them, they were stuck in their hospital rooms, and reading positive comments on social media really gave them a lot of joy. And so it's hard to like, pick, like swing the pendulum one way or the other as like, this is good or this is bad. It's such a new thing. And like you said, like it's a lot of it is about curating. What are the pictures that we're going to show? But how can we also protect ourselves and our kids from growing up with a curated view of childhood based on the few pictures or the many pictures that we post about them without necessarily asking them first?
And out of curiosity, so you're a photographer, you're a mom, and you're also a lawyer, and you specialized in juvenile cases for a long time. How did you come to that path? Was it something you stumbled across, or was that your passion from the start?
That's my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm glad you asked. I think I stumbled to it. I was the first in my family to go to college, definitely the first in my family to go to law school. And when I came out of law school, I found that I really loved oral advocacy and became a prosecutor. And I had always really loved kids and knew I wanted to work with kids in some way, whether as a teacher or a counselor. And so helping kids go through difficult times where they were often victims in my cases was a really powerful experience for me. And it kind of just led from being a prosecutor to I ended up working with kids who were in foster care for a number of years. And then I had an opportunity to join the law school and start teaching. And when I started teaching, I didn't actually focus on juvenile law, but it was something that I always did in my spare time. I took on a lot of pro bono cases as a guardian ad litem, which is probably like a CASA by you, I think it's called. And eventually I kind of made my way back to the juvenile law area. And I think that I always, not always, but for many years, I wondered how I was going to make my new profession as a lawyer, law professor kind of fit with my creative side and my passion for helping kids. And so this really kind of was a collision of all of those things. And writing the book has really been a neat thing for me because, I don't think we need to have, an official like brand. I think that would be like silly, but like it's hard, I think, for some creative people to kind of find their place or find like what it is that they do. And I think that this book was something that was really able to kind of pull a lot of strings together, a lot of things that were really meaningful to me into one place.
And that's all very wonderful. And I don't want to make light because it is a very serious subject, but I do have one silly thing to say.
Yeah.
When you were with a special victims unit for
Yes.
many, many years, do you ever, when you go to head into the courtroom, hear dun dun in your head?
I do. And over this long COVID break, I don't know why, but I've kind of found Law and Order SVU again on the TV, and I find that I go watch it now more. I watched it in law school and then didn't watch it for many years, and I do hear that in my head.
I love it. So before we get into tips and tricks and the stuff in the book, I wanted to share that I love how you're sharing your family on Instagram. I do social media for a living, and so I haven't in a while done talks to a bunch of people because obviously we're stuck at home. But one of the things I love to tell people is that you can share without sharing. And what I mean by that is, you do the little tricks like, when my daughter learned how to ride her bicycle, I showed, the back of her helmet and the road in front of her and things like that. And you do a lot of that kind of thing too, where it's kind of, the kid's head snuggling into the dog's face is the picture, the focus, but your child is there too. So you can share the feelings of what you're doing without actually sacrificing, showing off your children too much.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate how you do that. I like your feed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a feed also that I kind of go back and forth. It's usually a private feed, and so I'm hoping not to have like masses of followers on the feed, but it's something that's a nice way to be able to stay connected with people that are meaningful to me. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks.
And then that kind of also brings us into the next subject I wanted to talk about, which is privacy, because I'm one of those who believes there's no such thing as privacy on the internet. And I think people have a hard time understanding that, since there are settings that can be friends only, or I think really the only ultimately private thing you have is when you click yourself only, like on Facebook, where you can choose friends, yourself, the world. As soon as you put something out there to even just one person, they can screenshot it and share it. So I like to remind people constantly, everything there is public. So I think that's another thing to consider when choosing how much you share.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And first, the only me setting is something that I find really helpful as a way for people who just want to share something with themselves or to have as a memory. But there was an incident last year where the only me setting became public for everybody for a brief time. And so I think it's important that even if we use a privacy setting, that it can still be shared widely. I do have an idea for parents who have used the only me setting before and want to save their pictures, and I'll come back to that. But the other piece about the people screenshotting the images is something that I don't think parents think about as much as they probably should. When I started this work, I found a picture, I didn't even find, across my news feed came a picture of a naked baby kind of from the back, and it was a chubby little kid, and the child was like turned around kind of facing away. And you saw the child's face, he was kind of like twisting his body, but you didn't see his front side. And someone had posted a meme with it that said, when you overdo it for the holidays. And a lot of parents were sharing that picture, a lot of people were sharing that picture, not knowing who that child was. And so you can't help but wonder, did that parent know that their child was going to be a meme when that image was first posted somewhere? And also, how was that child going to feel years later to realize that their image was stolen and used for that? And there are so many other examples of that, of images being taken out of context and being used in ways that parents and eventually kids could never have predicted. You want that tip that I had?
Yes.
Should I share that now? Okay. So something that I've recently learned about, and it's new here in the United States, is that Facebook is trying, might not be the best word, but Facebook has created a way for people to be able to kind of migrate their data if they did ever want to leave Facebook. And one of the tools that is now available to people is that you can pretty easily have Facebook make a copy of all your pictures and send them to a Google photo album. And what's nice about that is that Google Photos, as opposed to Facebook, is primarily a private site. I mean, Google still has the picture, so I guess it's not fully private, but it's at least off of your newsfeed. It's in a gallery there. And then you can choose who the audience is. There's also a quick button that you can push to download all your photos to your hard drive, which would probably be an even safer way to do it. But what's nice about that feature is that we can do that now, and maybe 6 months from now decide to leave Facebook or have some sort of trigger that makes us realize that we want a different social media platform than we had, and we can feel pretty secure that our pictures are still somewhere else. So many people, myself included, have come to places where our social media was really a place that we viewed not only as a place to connect, but a place to store memories. And I think if we can get away from looking at Facebook as a place to store memories, we can maybe have healthier relationships with it and use it for what value it can give us now, as opposed to years ago or in the future.
And that was a good segue too, because the next thing I wrote down was from your introduction, where you said social media is a parent's modern day baby book, posting from cradle to college. So what should we be cautious about in that manner, but also why is that okay?
So I think that we have to be cautious in the sense that these are things that we used to share just with our family, or maybe not even share it with our extended family, maybe just share it with our child, when the child gets older. And for so many parents, Facebook is now the place where all those memories go to be recorded. So many parents kind of got onto Facebook and started sharing without kind of realizing the longevity of it. When Facebook was only around for a year, it was a very different beast than now having a decade's worth of information on our kids. So I think it's something to really think about. And when I call it the modern day baby book, I'm not saying that it should be the modern day baby book. I'm saying that for so many people,
that's what it's become.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways that a post could put your child in jeopardy?
So one of the scariest things is the idea of pedophiles stealing images and using them for nefarious purposes, whether the image itself or the idea of kind of a deep fake or a morphed image where they take the image and morph it with another image. We're learning more and more about that as being a serious safety concern. There's also concerns about identity theft. As we share information about our kids, we're sharing our mother's maiden name with our facial recognition. We're sharing our first pet's name. We're sharing their date of birth. We're sharing all of these pieces that put together could be prime targets for data thieves or even just data collectors who might be interested in creating kind of digital dossiers on our kids. I mean, we know they're doing it with us. They could be doing it with our kids. So those are kind of two of the biggest safety issues, although there are many other ones that I could go into and longer. But I also think that there's a concern that's not so much about the physical safety, but the emotional safety of our kids. We want to teach our kids to use, to be careful when they share pictures of other people and to seek out consent before they share people's pictures. And the best way that we can model that for them is to show them that we value their interest in privacy and we value their ability to give consent to their own image.
So that popped a question into my head, thinking about, so our kids aren't on social media yet. They are 11 and 13, and they're wildly not interested in phones and things like other kids. They still play outside and climb trees more than they want to be on video games or anything like that. So I feel lucky in that. But also, I have lots of relatives that have their kids sharing things that I look at it and they're my relatives. So I have love for them and I think they're cute, but I look at them thinking, oh my gosh, that makes you look so much older than you are. Or if I was a parent, I wouldn't let my kids share this. And they know they're sharing it because I can see them commenting on it. What advice do you have? Because parents don't like to be told. And also you brought up the mom shaming. I don't want to be a mom shamer.
Yeah.
What is some advice you have for sharing, maybe a nice way to say it that they might want to take a second look at what their kids are posting?
So that's a great question. And there's a couple different ways that I would approach answering it. I think one of the things that I would say is we approach it from a place of compassion and kindness and recognizing that they might be doing that. Most likely they're not oversharing because they're trying to be malicious. They just haven't considered the importance of the digital footprint, and they haven't considered the idea that there could be people looking at these images with thinking something bad. It just wouldn't even cross their mind. I'm really glad you asked that question because something that I've been coming face to face with in my work is that I approach this area purposefully to be inclusive. A friend of mine said it's almost like I wanted to create a big tent that everyone had a seat at so that no one felt like my research wasn't for them or my book wasn't for them. And with 80% of parents sharing about their kids on social media, I really think that my book is targeted to that 80%. And so I would love it if folks like this, your family that you're talking about, that they saw something in the book that jumped out at them as this is a book for me, as opposed to people who don't share online saying, oh, here's a book to back up why I don't share. What's been really interesting is that for years, my work, my interviews, everything I've done on this has really tried to be inclusive to the amazing parents of kids who have sick children who have trusted me to take their pictures and to watch them share their stories. I've been really conscious of not mom shaming any of my many friends who choose to share. But in doing so, I very recently realized that the people who don't share at all are actually really outraged by my position because they think I'm being too easy on all the parents or like that I'm telling them to share. And I'm not trying to tell anyone to share. I'm trying to tell everybody to know about it and make the best decision that you can for your family. And I hope that comes through.
I love that. And honestly, I hadn't even thought about, I'm so careful with my own information, I see those little quizzes that people take and I'm like, that's bait. They're trapping your information because they'll hide in there your first pet's name or things like that. It'll seem like an innocent quiz, but you can see right away, okay, they're baiting you.
Right.
I had not thought that by posting from young days to older that we're just giving all of their future security questions away with our posts. So that's even new to me.
Well, it's yeah, I think it's all we're figuring it out as we go along. And one of the concerns that I have from a safety perspective is we don't even know what the capabilities are going to be 10 years from now for people with bad intentions to get our information. And so like right now we feel like, well, we share it with just our friends and it's not going to be able to be seen. But 10 years from now, we don't know what that looks like, how the technology will be able to go back and get it, or facial recognition, or DNA is a really interesting example. 20 years ago, we never anticipated that you could pay $99 and pretty much know everything about your family history, right? There were a lot of secrets that were kept, from that. Danny Shapiro has a great podcast about this. We don't know in 20 years what looking at someone's face is going to be able to tell us, and when we share all of this, we take away our child's right to share on their own terms or to never share at all.
I think everybody should read the whole book, but since we have you here, what are some things, aside from the personal information that we were talking about, what are some things that parents should avoid posting about their children?
I think parents should avoid posting any pictures where they're naked or semi-naked. And that really even includes bathing suits. And that's really hard for me. My son is a gymnast, and figuring out how to share his videos safely is really hard because he loves for me to share his videos. And so, taking them from far away, I don't really know the best way to do it. I wish that I could tell you, but it's something I struggle with a lot. But if we can avoid posting any pictures of kids in states of undress is very important. Avoid posting full names and dates of birth, especially, the happy birthday post on the actual birthday, I think could be dangerous. So maybe share that the day before, the day after, the week after. We should know the privacy settings on the websites that we share on. Make sure that if you mean to share with just close friends, that you take the time to develop a close friend list on Facebook or on social media, and consider deleting things after they no longer serve you. And so that's kind of one of the things that when my son really wants to share a gymnastics video and we decide it's okay, that it might be out there for a day for people to see, not people, his family and friends to see, but it will be gone shortly thereafter. Also, making sure that you're only sharing things that your child is comfortable with sharing. Never share anything that they would find embarrassing. When you're sharing about medical conditions, there's reasons why families share that make a lot of sense, but also just to make sure that you feel that the benefit that you get out of sharing that medical information outweighs the harm of putting that information into the public sphere. And then I guess the last thing is probably to consider your child's overall sense of well-being, both now and years into the future. And I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but those are some that come to mind quickly.
And that reminded me of something that I do. So our 11-year-old, she's a flibbertigibbet. I love her. The stuff that comes out of her mouth sometimes is so crazy. So one of the things that I've taken to doing is when I recap one of our conversations, I'll type the 11-year-old and her words as opposed to saying her name. So I think that's another tiny tip, but a good one.
That's a really great tip. And that's probably what the thing that I think I see the most in my daily life is that I don't use their first name. If I say, kiddo number one, or, I have only one girl, so girl child, whatever. Yeah. I mean, that changes all the
Big
time.
Big sister, little sister.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good idea too, to take that piece away. And so if parents do that, I think if you've been sharing the child's full name and you're kind of approaching this research kind of as someone who's been sharing all the time but wants to do a few things to try to tighten up their digital footprint, that would be a really good place to start.
So do you want to take us through your book really quickly and give us some of the topics that you cover?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the book starts with an overview on the different ways that parents share and why parents share. So we talk about, we use real case examples to explain why parents have made choices that they've made with sharing, from parents who are active in parenting groups and share, to parents who choose to never share at all about their kids, to parents who really are trying to find a place in the middle. It then talks about the power of narratives. And I pull from some of my own experiences. Last year, my son was bullied for being Jewish, and he wasn't getting the resolve he was looking for through the school system. And as a family, we decided to be public about what had happened. And we used social media as a tool to share what had happened. And it turned out a lot of other kids were going through it in our community. And it was my son's really first time engaging on social media. And it turns out that like other people felt so strongly about it that they started a petition for the school board to change their policies on how they handled anti-Semitism. And, you know, a week or two after the first post, he was up in front of the school board with a packed audience. And he said, I wasn't going to share tonight why this is so bad and why this hurts me. But I realized that I had a huge community of support behind me, and it helped me find my voice. And I think social media can do that. You know, with the people who make fun of parenting or put it down, they kind of forget that our society moves forward through the power of our narratives and the power of our storytelling. And so a part of the book talks about that and the importance of storytelling and how social media can be used for social good and social change. It then talks about the online risks like the data collectors and data thieves. And because my background is in child abuse and child pornography prosecution, I do spend some time talking about the risks of morphed child pornography and images being stolen for nefarious purposes like that. And I talk through kind of the case law with that as well. I talk a lot about the lens of the child's experience. When we share online and we show our child pictures all the time of us taking them, like, you know, child's on a dance recital, and we take a video of it, and then the moment the child gets off the stage, we're showing them a picture of that dance recital. In some ways, we have to be cognizant that we could be altering that child's memory of what it felt like to be in the dance recital. Instead of seeing it from the stage, they're now seeing it from the audience, from our perspective. And so being mindful of when it is that we share things with our kids and how we share it. I talk about how kids feel about parent sharing, and all of this is backed with the research studies that are very interdisciplinary. So I tell parents, and I show parents through example of how kids feel about online sharing, and how kids think that parents could share better. I spend some time talking about the right to be forgotten, which you're in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you actually have probably the best chance of a right to be forgotten because your state is really considered, and I'm using someone else's words here, the vanguard of digital privacy laws. And so the idea that perhaps one of the ways we can handle this is that when kids get older, they can have a right to delete the digital footprint of the things that their parents shared about them. I talk about teens and tweens online, kind of going back to that question you asked about what do you do to help your 13, 14, 15-year-old, 16, 17, 18-year-old maybe too, share more smarter, and use social media and other technology tools more appropriately. And then I really come back to the idea of balance, the idea of empowering parents. Throughout my work, I see this as a place for a conversation to start. And I see this as something that needs to be at the center of child rearing discourse. So the idea that, you know, we all discipline our kids differently, we all feed our kids differently, there are best practices, and so we can talk to parents about best practices, but they have to decide when to use them. So I hope that covers it quite a bit of the book. I really situate the concerns in two main areas, the privacy issues and then the childhood well-being. So.
What are your thoughts on, and everybody's different, but what are your thoughts on when social media should just be introduced, just flat out introduced, this is what it is, how it works? And do you also think that once your kids are on there, that as parents, we should be monitoring them?
Sure. So I think that it should be introduced slowly, gradually, and based on the individual child's ability to kind of comprehend and understand what it is. Hopefully it's not a major part of their lives, because if it's not a major part of our lives, then when they're younger, it won't be a major part of their lives. I do find some concern in the fact that our laws that protect kids online kind of disappear when kids turn 13, and 13 is also the age that they're allowed by law to get onto these platforms. So we basically kind of like giving kids a driver's license without any time having a learner's permit. And so as parents, if we could start incorporating our kids into our own social media feeds, as in like my Instagram account is really a family account, and I try to think of it as they're part of the decision to share. When I share and I get feedback, I try to let the kids respond to the feedback if it's about them. And I never, and I would never post about them if they didn't want to, but I think I've kind of gotten off track a little bit. So we're talking about the kids getting to an age where they can appropriately get
Mm-hmm.
social media when they should. So I think that they can not know about it for many years and then slowly know that it exists. And then they can be part of our social media accounts. And then eventually they're going to need to decide we're going to need to decide if we're going to let them have a social media account. As far as supervising kids go, I think that I'm a children's rights scholar. I believe kids should have rights to privacy. But at the same time, I think the internet is a really scary and dangerous place, and social media is a really scary and dangerous place. And we can't give it to them without supervision unless we feel really comfortable that they're going to make wise choices. And also, we're not just we're not just trying to stop them from making mistakes. We're trying to protect them from the mistakes that other people will make, towards them that can harm them. In a lot of ways, we're opening the door to a room that we've never been in. We don't know what they're going to approach when they go onto social media. So I do think that supervision is critical and important. And having conversations with kids about how we're supervising is also important, so that kids don't feel like, we're like they're on probation and, they did something wrong and so we have to supervise, but more because this is what we do, is we work on this together. And part of my job as your mom is to keep you safe.
And that is such a hard thing as a parent, because when we try to protect them, they always take it as we think they're going to do. I shouldn't say the word always, but I'm going to use my family as an example instead of using always. The younger daughter, she very often feels like we're not trusting her. And it's a constant discussion. If you walk alone and you take a shortcut that we don't know you're going to take, it's not that we don't think you don't know where you're going. It's we don't know who's on that shortcut path. We don't know where to find you if you stray.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a constant battle. Anyways, I just want to say that, it's hard enough just with real world situations. Then you add into it predators and things like that online. There are so many other things outside of the children not to trust.
Yeah. I think that as a mom who's researching this, I am full of fault myself, and I haven't figured it all out. And I would never, I hate the word expert because, I am still very much learning through my own experiences, right? So please don't call me a parenting expert. But, what I do know is I know I know statistics about the risks that are out there. I know about, the laws that protect and the laws that don't protect kids. And so I'm just kind of doing the best I can with the information I have. And a lot of times in many places in my life, including digital parenting, I go back to Maya Angelou's quote, do the best you can until you know better, then do better. It's constantly me trying to figure out and navigate the best ways to move forward. And as you know, as a parent, there are times where we feel like we're doing a great job, and there are times where we feel like we need to, throw all the books away and buy new ones.
Right. Yeah. I want to talk about balance for a minute also, which is hard for me because I do social media for a living, which means that I'm online all the time. So I cannot even fathom how to tell my kids what a balance is for social media. And happily, it's not changing their minds to go on to the computer and start doing things. So I've still got them climbing the trees, doing a good job there. But what would you say is a good balance for parents, knowing that their children are watching, and also for children as they move into the use of social media? What's a good life balance for both?
I think that it's a good life balance is to make social media and make technology just a very small part of what it is that we do each day. I think the reality, though, like you mentioned, your job is on social media. My job right now is to protect kids in foster care, and I have to do that while driving between, babysitters or driving to the supermarket, or lots of times where my kids are around me or sitting and doing puzzles with them, and I need to take care of something. And so in this age of COVID, it's really hard to set, this is the time that I'm going to be doing social media or computers, and this is the time where I'm not going to be. But the more that we can carve out times in our lives that we are just fully present without the technology, I think is a really good way for us to start to try to find balance. our kids don't know, at least my kids don't know, if the call that I'm taking or the email that I'm responding to is critically important for, a child on my caseload, or if I'm just, texting a friend, hey, how you doing? And so those situations are going to happen, but if we can try to streamline it and to talk and be honest with our kids and to say, I'm sorry, like sometimes I mess up and I have to say, listen, mommy's really sorry. I know I said I was going to read to you for this hour and I'm sorry I had to walk away and do something else. So I think those are just some thoughts about balance, but it is a struggle, especially right now while our work and home lives kind of collide, and our social lives, because all of our social lives are pretty much online now too.
So something that I passed through in the book was images that could be breaking the law without us realizing that we're breaking any laws or agreements. What are some of those things that we might not realize we're doing wrong?
Sure. So I think that, when I think of people taking pictures of other people's kids, there's always lots of gray areas. But if our kids are in certain programs and we're administrators at programs like a camp or a school, we need to make sure that we understand what the parents' wishes are and if they've written and given consent to use their images for things. I think teens, one of the most concrete takeaways is when we talk to our teens about images that are illegal is I don't think a lot of teens understand that if they should not be sexting, and if they are, they're in possession of child pornography, even if it's with somebody their own age. And there's so many layers to that, but there's just such a lack of knowledge on what the parameters are. So those are kind of two totally different types of laws that could be broken. But one of the issues that I'm hoping to dive even deeper into, and I wrote a really short piece on this recently, is the idea of now that our kids are Zoom conferencing with their teachers, as a mom, should you be able to take a picture of that class and share that picture on social media? You're violating those other kids' privacy when you do that. Whether it's illegal or not is really different. If you're the teacher and you're sharing information, then there's probably a legal consequence. But if you're the parent doing it, it's really a gray area. And so I think parents need to just be really careful and realize that even if there isn't a law prohibiting them from sharing something, that they need to, think about if it's right to do it.
Yeah. And I just had a tip pop into my head again. When I'm with other people's kids, I like to, if I'm taking pictures, obviously I'm taking them for my memories, right? We're still collectors of our memories, but I tend to send their kids' pictures to them and let them decide what they're going to do with them. And I'm responsible for my kids. You be responsible for your kids. And I think that's a very healthy way to do it.
Yeah, when our kids are school age, they're interacting with a lot of kids who have whose parents might react to social media very different than we do. And so instead of just posting a picture of your son's class or your daughter's class, it's our two friends who are playing together, send it to the other parent. And if you are okay with it being shared, you can tell them that, but don't just assume that it's okay. The other thing, a little kind of quick takeaway that I think some parents do is that they put a smiley face, like a sticker almost, over other kids in a picture. So if there's if your child is getting an award at a baseball game, you can cover the faces of the other kids who are also getting the award if you really feel drawn to share that moment of the child getting the award.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And then it dawned on me, I hadn't thought about this before, but do you think that your book would be good for teenagers to read? Because they're coming into their own, and maybe it'll help set them up for at least a try at a good path.
I do. I think that kids and teenagers are essential to this conversation. I think they can learn from the book, but also we as adults can learn so much from their reactions to it. We can see what areas, how did they feel growing up being shared? How would they advise parents to do it differently? What do they know right now as 16-year-olds that they hope they remember when they're 26, 36, having children of their own? So I think it would be great if teens read it. And I'm so glad you read the book. You're one of the first to read it. So did you enjoy it?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'll leave you a review. I had one more quick little question because I saw in a bunch of your articles that you were quoted in, they used the term sharenters. How how do we at what point do we stop being a parent and become a sharent?
I think the word sharent is I'm like associated as one of the sharenting scholars, but the word sharent just like makes me like, makes me not feel so great. We talked about what the title of the book should be called, and some folks thought sharenting needed to be in the title, but I think the word just kind of has a negative connotation now. So I would say we can focus on parents who share about their family on social media is a much healthier way to say it. Not even share about their kids, but they're sharing about their family on social media. We can say that some families feel like it's not a good idea to share at all. And that's, a very valid position. And for families who do choose to share on social media, there are ways that they can do it in a safer manner. Even though the word sharenting shouldn't necessarily be associated with the negativity, because that is kind of the word that parents who share about kids on social media is probably defined by Collins Dictionary as sharenting. The real issue is the oversharenting, and where that line is. What makes someone oversharenting is the question. Is it oversharenting to post your holiday card picture? Is it oversharenting to announce the arrival of your new baby? Not for me. But for someone else, they're going to say that's too much. And so we all have to kind of figure out where our comfort is. And hopefully the book can do that, and it can help parents figure that out for themselves and give them the tools to do so.
It's a funny tightrope we walk. We should just work on being the best we can be and support our friends. And we've been talking to Stacey Steinberg, the author of Growing Up Shared, which is out on August 4th. Do you want to give out links? How can people find out more about the book and follow you or not
Great.
follow you?
Well, they can go to www.stacey, S-T-A-C-E-Y, Steinberg, STEINBERG.com, and there's links right there. You could also go to www.growingupshared.com. That might be a little bit easier, and all the links are there. I do have a Facebook page, but it is not very populated. I would say my Twitter page is probably a good place to get more information, and I'm at SG Steinberg. Do you want me to say that so you can edit the first time out and I can say it clearer? Or are you good with it?
If you like it, I like it.
Okay, sounds good. As long as you feel like I was clear. I know that sometimes it's not super clear.
No, it's great. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you. It was so good to be here.
And then